Welcome back to Basic Training for the Transitioning Military Veteran. This is Part 5, Job Hunting and Interviews. And once again, I'm joined by Dr. Rich Shuttler. Dr. Rich, hello.
Hi, John. How are you?
Doing well. Yourself?
Excellent. Let's get at it.
All right. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to make your job hunting more efficient and effective. And then we're going to go into the actual job interview. We're going to share several strategies with you and really just give you all of the best tips that we know on how to really ace that job interview. I should say, though, that before proceeding with this, by now you should have the following. You should have designed your ideal transition. You should have plotted out your transition timeline. You should have identified your skills and your gaps. You should have put together your resume, and you should have started networking. And again, as we talked about in the previous video, Rich, this is not something that you want to shortcut, right?
That's correct, John. As we've been going through this whole program, it's about creating a purposeful plan that people can follow and then adjust it as they need to, because it's that plan that's going to help them be successful.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And so I know that, again, we tend to want to rush through these things, but I will tell you that with programs like this, the main reason that someone is not as successful as they want to be is because they didn't take their time with each part of the program. So please take your time. You have the time to do it. And believe me, at the end of the day, you're going to be much happier with the result. So now let's get into the job search. What you have to realize about a job hunt is that job hunting really is a job in itself. It requires time. It requires dedication. It requires persistence. It requires patience. And it requires a positive attitude. You have to recognize that this isn't something you're only going to be spending 10 minutes a day on and then getting back to whatever else it is you want to do. This really, you have to treat it as if it were a job. You have a mission, and that mission is something you really have to dedicate a good portion of your day to. The best way to do it, I think, Rich, is to pretend that it is your job until you find the job.
I agree with that, John, and I agree with it to the point where I encourage people to actually put a certain amount of time in their day and say this is their job searching time, and actually get ready like if they were going to an actual job. Take a shower, get cleaned up. Whether you're staying at home or going somewhere else, it doesn't matter, but get yourself into the role. I have found that when you start acting yourself into a new way of thinking, literally when you put on your best clothes and you're sitting there, if you will, and maybe it's a casual business attire, even at your home, you tend to focus far more on what you need. And I think that's what's really required here, is that dedicated time to put forward and just totally focus on what needs to happen to do that job search.
I love that phrase, acting yourself into a new way of thinking, and I absolutely agree with that. I work with a lot of small and home-based business owners, and you see it on infomercials, and you read it, and if you see any ads, you see this, work in your pajamas or work from the beach with your laptop. But the truth is that working in your pajamas is not really conducive to your best work. Working from the beach is not really conducive to your best work. Yeah, it makes for a pretty picture, but if you're going to treat something seriously, you first have to internally take it seriously. You would never go to an office having not showered or not changed your clothes. You certainly wouldn't go there in your pajamas. And so you really have to treat this just as seriously. That's what's going to make you successful in this endeavor. Treat it as seriously as you would treat the job that you want to get.
And John, the most important part really is the mindset of having the positive mindset put forth in the job search. So when you have yourself in a situation where you are dressed, you have showered, you have shaved, whatever it requires for you, even if you're sitting at the kitchen table at home, pretend you're at a desk like you might be in a job and put everything in the right place. Maybe even have yourself a cup of coffee there. things that we would normally do, because all of a sudden when our mindset is focused on what we're doing, we tend to get greater results sooner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about the steps that you want to take during your job hunt. The first thing that I would recommend you do is post your resume. Start posting your resume online on all of the different sites where they will accept it. So that would include LinkedIn. There are, in all likelihood, many local job posting sites. There are online newspaper and media sites where you can post just your resume. Even Facebook now has a professional skills section where you can list the skills that you have. There are also, I don't have it on this slide, Rich, but there are also many sites that are just for military veterans where they can post their resume, because a lot of companies want to hire veterans and they're going to look at those specialized sites just for your and your colleagues' resumes.
That's true. And everything online are opportunities to be able to get one's background out there for other people to see. But at the same token, we have to keep in mind how many millions of people are online on a daily basis in all these websites. So while you may be looking for one specific job, there are millions of people out there posting their information to these sites, and so therefore it's really important to be focused on where you put your information, because in the sense that sometimes more is just more, it's not better. The idea is to get focused on where you put your content, where you put your job information, if you will, whether it be your resume or cover letter, so that the right people get it for your specific benefits.
And remember what we talked about in an earlier video, and that was these keyword searches that a lot of companies are now doing, especially in the online space, as Rich just pointed out, because so many people are posting their resumes online. These keyword searches are becoming more and more important. So make sure that in your resume, in your objective, in various sections, you're using the words and the phrases that describe the job that you want. That's going to allow your resume to get flagged and to stand out amongst the hundreds, the thousands of resumes that are getting posted every day. So really, really think about that when you're posting your resume. What is the position you want, and what are the keywords or phrases that an employer would be looking for if they were trying to fill that position? Now, this is just online, and this is a very good first step, but it's a very general step. What you're basically doing when you post your resume online is you're casting a wide net. This isn't where it stops. This is just where it begins. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start lasering in more on the specific job opportunities that are out there. So whereas with the resume, when you're posting it online, you're usually just posting the resume. When you're sending a resume to somebody, you're going to want to include a cover letter. So your next step is to actually write that cover letter. And what the cover letter does is it gives you the opportunity to talk a little bit about yourself. It allows you to point out the relevant experience that's on your resume and how you think that experience and you can be of service to the organization. And it also allows you to talk about what's not on your resume, different aspects of military service that maybe wouldn't fit in the tight format of a resume, but something that you want to let people know about you. A cover letter is basically a formatic letter, and so what we've done is we've included this form that you can use to start writing your cover letter. And it follows a business letter format, and it's very simple and straightforward. Dear, and whoever is looking for the position, in some cases it'll just be Dear Sir, or to whom it may concern. I'm writing to express my interest in the blank position at your company, whatever the name of the company is. My combination of, and this is where you would list your skills, makes me the right person to help your team. I've developed, implemented blank, and my blank years of military service have given me the ability to work within or lead a team. So this is where you would list some of the skill sets and abilities that maybe you didn't have a proper space for on your resume. I can be reached anytime via email at, and then you list your email, or phone at, and list your phone number. And then thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to speaking with you about this employment opportunity. Sincerely, and your name. Again, a very basic cover letter, but it covers all of the ground that you want a cover letter to cover. Rich, anything to add to this?
John, what I believe is important here is for those who are listening to remember that we already talked about the skills inventory. So with a little reflective learning, they can go back and take that information and start to fill that in, particularly here where it talks about your list of attributes. Because what we're seeking here are the critical few that are the most essential for the job that somebody's applying for. So we certainly don't need to list them all, but a couple that are the most important. And as we go through this cover letter, it's also important to remember that this should be what I call specific, succinct, and purposeful, and not go on and on and on and make this a long letter. It's not intended to be a long letter. It's intended to be a cover letter of introduction, if you will. And on one point, just to remember for those when you're filling out your phone number, it's critical that you remember the phone number you're putting in here is the one people are going to call. So if by chance you have a home phone and you have children who may be answering it, you may want to consider perhaps using a cell phone that you have and the phone's with you all the time. And if that's the case, always remember when that phone rings, it could be a potential employer, and answer that phone in a professional manner saying good morning, good afternoon, this is whoever your name is. And that way, you're ensured that when the phone rings, you put your best voice and foot forward, if you will, because that's the first time somebody may be calling you to address you about a job opportunity, and you don't want to answer the phone in a casual manner or in a jokingly manner, thinking that it might be somebody else who you're expecting a call from.
Great advice. Great advice. The next thing that you want to do once you have your cover letter written is now you're really going to begin looking at specific job listings. And there are many places that you're going to go to find these job listings. And this is, again, this is why this is a full-time job. Hunting for your job is a full-time job because there are so many places to look and there are so many opportunities for you to apply. So offline sources such as newspapers and, if applicable, trade publications, magazines, online sources, again, job sites, individual company websites, and many of the sites where you already posted your resume. Again, we talked about the sites that are specifically for military veterans, and here are three that you can take a look at: civilianjobs.com, defensetalent.com, and hireveterans.com. These are arguably the top three websites for military veterans to post their resumes, the top three websites where companies go to look for veterans when they want to hire a veteran. So absolutely make it a point to hit these three websites, and feel free to go and find some more. These are not the only three. These are just, again, based on the number of traffic and the number of postings, the top three, but there are many others out there as well. And if you do a quick Google search for sites like this, you will find many. Feel free to post your resumes there. When you start to find the opportunities through these listings, you now want to submit your resume or an application. In some cases, it's going to be one. In some cases, it's going to be the other. So you're either going to send a copy of your resume with your cover letter specifically written for that opportunity. You're going to address it to the proper person. You're going to obviously change the position and the name of the company in that first paragraph. And if you feel like it's necessary, you may want to even change the paragraphs that highlight the certain parts of your resume or the unspoken parts of your resume dealing with your skill sets, because you think one may be more applicable to one position than another. So rewrite that cover and that resume when you have to. In other cases, you're going to fill out an application. Either way, when you're filling in the application, you do get to basically rewrite what you have already written in the cover letter or on the resume. And then remember, again, utilize those keywords that you think someone might be looking for, especially when you're applying online or you're filling out an online application. Make sure that you're using the keywords and the phrases that you believe somebody is going to be searching for to fill the position that you're seeking. And again, Rich, this is really where you've got to just put your head down and get to work.
Here's a great example, John, of why that's important. As you know, I get hired by organizations to help them hire people from time to time, particularly when they're looking to bring in military veterans because of my background. And even when I was working in an organization hiring people, there were many times when people would submit their cover letter and resume, and on their cover letter, it would be addressed to the wrong person, the wrong company, and actually address the wrong position. And that happens because sometimes people get so caught up in applying for so many different jobs, and they try to just take the same cover letter and they make a mistake. Or they don't take the cover letter and really proofread it before they send it out to realize that, yes, you have to change the name for the job applicant. You have to change the company name who you're applying for. And it gets monotonous. I understand that when somebody's applying for 3 or 4 or maybe even 10 different jobs and maybe over a period of time, and they just take the old cover letter, just think that they corrected it the way it should without really proofreading it before they send it. So here, the focus, again, that John and I are speaking about is to take your time. And remember that each time you either submit something electronically or put something in an envelope and put it in the mail, that may be the only time you ever get to make a first impression.
Absolutely. And when you're submitting all of these applications, and you're going to submit many applications, you're going to submit many resumes, make sure that you keep a running list of all of the positions that you've applied for and when, as well as a copy of the job listing, each of your custom cover letters, and if you made a custom resume. Keep a good running tally of what you've applied for, because you will start to lose track. If you're doing this right, you're actually supposed to lose track. You should be applying for at least 1 or 2 different positions per day, because at the end of the day, job hunting very often is a numbers game. And the more jobs you apply for, the more interviews you're going to get. But the last thing that you want is if somebody calls you, you don't want to have forgotten what job they were calling on. You really want to have that information handy so that it seems like when they call, you're the only job they're looking for. You were waiting for their call. You're so glad they called back, and you know exactly what position they're calling back about. I think, Rich, it sends, it makes a very good, I guess, second impression.
It does, John, and I encourage people to do 1 or 2 things, but they both consist of being totally organized. For some, if they're really good with a program such as Excel, they can create themselves a spreadsheet and put in perhaps either by date, you can put it in by company name, and that way you can fill out exactly what date you sent the cover letter and resume to, how you sent it to them, who's the person you sent it to, and you can do that for every one of them. And that way, if a call comes in, very quickly on that Excel file, you can go to that and refresh your mind. Or if you know you're going to have a call in 3 hours, you can go to that. And for those people who are not really good with something like Excel or a computer program, then create yourself a manual file. And that means if you need to get one of those multi-group folders that you put in something for each one, for each job applicant you put in, whatever it's going to take to manage and look at this quickly to remind you where you applied for jobs. And if you happen to be somebody who travels, as many people do from time to time, whether you're going on a vacation or a business interview across the country, take those files with you so that in case while you're on the road, somebody should happen to call you and want an interview real quickly, you can have everything you need. This is about, chance favors the prepared. And so be prepared for any chance that comes up.
For those of you who are more tech savvy, there's also a program called Evernote that I will leave a link to underneath this video that you can use. It's a free program, and you can keep track of all of your applications and resumes in there. What's great about Evernote is that it follows you wherever you go. So if you were at a coffee shop and you needed to just log on to look at some information, you could log on to Evernote from any internet-enabled computer anywhere, or from your smartphone or from your tablet. You can log on there as well. So, if you are traveling quite a bit, if you're traveling between locations, you will always have that information with you. That's just one tool. There are a lot of different tools out there. Evernote is my preferred tool for keeping information like that I always need to have at my fingertips. Now, let's talk a little bit about following up, because in some cases, job listings will specifically ask you not to follow up. And while that may seem a little off-putting, if you look at it from their point of view, if they're getting hundreds or thousands of resumes, they would need at least one full-time person just to reply to the follow-ups. So many times you're going to find they don't want you to follow up. But when you can, it is a good idea to make a phone call to follow up with whomever you sent your resume to. When you make the call, though, make sure that you keep the call short and professional, and honestly, don't expect that much information most of the time. And of course, if you do follow up, make a note of it on your list. And I can't really stress enough, Rich, that when you make that call, you really do have to keep your expectations low and keep the call very short and very professional.
That's true, John. And I think it's also important to note that when you make that call, if in fact they want to call, is that if you happen to be at home and you may be doing this call from your kitchen table because that's where you're working from, make sure all the noise in the background is off. Don't have the radio on, don't have the TV on, don't have somebody in the kitchen running the blender or kids running around. Remember, again, this is your opportunity to make an impression. And those small things make a big difference in the long run.
No doubt about it. Now, let's just talk about the reality. The reality is that many of the companies you apply to are going to fill the job without ever letting you know. And again, it's not the nicest way to do things, but with just the sheer numbers of job applications out there, it's the way things work now. And what I really want to stress is, don't let this discourage you, okay? It's not about you. It's nothing that you should take personally. Again, it's just the way the environment is. The most important thing for you to do is remember that it's not personal. Stay positive, because you will get callbacks. You will get follow-ups, and those callbacks, those follow-ups will lead to job interviews. The worst thing that can happen is if you put out a few of those resumes, you don't get any feedback, you don't get any callbacks, and then because of that, you get down on yourself and you stop. That is a self-defeating behavior, and you just don't want to get yourself into that cycle. Remember what I said earlier, this is a numbers game, so stay positive and keep putting those resumes out there. You will get the callbacks, and you will get the interviews.
John, the people, from my experiences, that do not get callbacks, do not get the opportunity for offering a second round of interviews or be able to share more about themselves, typically are those who apply for too many jobs they're not qualified for, or they do not have the skill set exactly what's being sought after. So if you go with the whole shotgun approach and say that I'm going to apply for all these potential jobs, you may find that in the long run, that's not the wisest approach. The reason why we have shared here about identifying your skill sets and the inventory of the skills and the key words is to help eliminate going out on that shotgun. So when you're applying for what I call the critical few jobs, if you will, that you meet the requirements. When our members that are listening to us here really are refined and purposeful and succinct in what they're doing, they will find greater success, and this won't be as prominent as other people who are experiencing the constant rejection.
Right. That's why earlier we said really try to set a goal of one or two jobs that you apply for that you're going to apply for per day, because if you're applying for 10 or 20 positions per day, and certainly there are enough job listings out there for you to do that, you're going to create the exact situation that Rich is referring to. You're going to not get callbacks because your resume, your skill set simply doesn't even come close to matching what they're looking for. And believe me, one or two quality applications per day is plenty. Over the course of a week or two or three, that's a lot of job applications. That's a lot of resumes to be sending out. That's a lot of follow-up, and you'll be keeping track of a lot. If you find yourself applying for a lot more than that every day, you're probably applying for too many jobs. As I said, though, those callbacks are going to come, and they are going to lead to interviews. And interviews are another very key step, and in many cases, one of the final steps for getting the job that you want. It's very important to do good prep work for the interview. So what are some things that you can do? First of all, try and do a little research on the company. You'll find a lot of good information online, and you really want to get a good idea of who it is you're about to interview with. If you have the opportunity then to work what you learned from your research into the interview, it shows that you took that extra step, and it frankly is an extra step that very few others take. It's a really easy way for you to stand out from the rest of the pack. You want to also refer back to the original listing and look at your custom cover letter and your resume. Make mental notes of the strengths that you listed for this particular position, any mental notes of the strengths that maybe you didn't list that you're thinking of now, so that you can also try to work them into the interview. The last thing, Rich, you want to do is go into the interview unprepared and sort of like a deer in the headlights without knowing what kind of company you're walking into, because if you don't know what kind of company you're walking into, you really can't answer some of the questions they're going to ask about how you can be of service to them.
That's true, John. And when we talked about doing a little research with the company, so here's a couple examples that people should literally do. Not necessarily just go to their website and kick it around on the pages, if you will, and see, oh, what great pictures they have. Do it very purposeful. Again, chance favors the prepared. Go into the website and look at what their vision is and what their mission is. Understand what they're about, what their goals are as much as you can. Some companies put a lot of information about what their short-term and long-term objectives are. But I think it's critical to know what the company's vision and mission are, because in many cases, a lot of the questions in the interview are going to relate to that, to make sure that the employees that they bring in are going to fit what they're doing and what they're about. So knowing that information is important. And going on the website, you may also want to look at who are some of their key stakeholders, perhaps some of their suppliers or their customers. Maybe there's information in there about what some customers have said about their products and services. And it's good to know a little bit about their products and services as well, because no doubt, as an employee, everybody's involved with the services or the products one way or another.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for vision and mission statements for a company, be specific with your searches. Type in on Google, type in the name of the company, but then type in something after that, such as vision or mission. If you're trying to find out who their suppliers are, type in that name of the company and then the word suppliers. If you're trying to find out who their competition is, competitors, right after the name of the company. Things like that are going to give you a real leg up, and honestly a certain level of confidence going into the interview. It's also important to make sure that you prepare yourself physically for the interview. So just a couple of basic tips there. The night before the interview, make sure you go to bed early. Don't make this one of those nights when you stay up too late and you only get a few hours sleep. Make sure that you have a good breakfast the day of the interview. It's the same advice that your mother probably gave you when you were a kid. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's going to give you energy. It's going to give you focus. If caffeine makes you jittery, stay away from it. okay? Because the last thing you want to be during an interview is jittery. Make sure you dress appropriately. Dress for success. The first thing people are going to see when you walk into their door is you and your clothing. What have you chosen to wear? It's a sign of respect when you dress appropriately, or even a little bit above that level, going into a job interview.
Dressing for success and being prepared for the interview takes on different meanings by different locations. So here's an example. When I retired from the Navy, I was in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. I retired there. And going for a job interview, if I would have shown up in a suit and tie, I would have been out of place, because organizations in the state of Hawaii, for example, have a much more relaxed, casual atmosphere on what their dress code is. Whereas if I was in New York applying for the same type of job, I would wear a suit and tie. So we have to dress for success, but we also have to keep in mind what is best. And what I encourage people to do in preparing for the interview is drive by the building, one where you know you're going to have to drive to anyway, so you know the best route, you know where to park. But I also tell people, why not sit in the parking lot a little bit, see what people walk in and out of and what they're wearing. It may sound like, well, you don't need to do that, that's too much preparation. Believe me, being prepared, there's never too much information that you can gather. And it's not like you have to sit there for 10 hours and all day, but sit in the parking lot maybe around lunchtime, see what people are wearing, make sure that what you're going to wear fits in, and that you're going to put, as you will say, your best foot forward when you actually put your foot into the door.
Yeah, I mean, reconnaissance is reconnaissance, right, Rich? Whether it's military or in this situation, you're going on that type of recon to get more information so that you're better prepared when it comes time to actually execute. When you go to the interview, make sure that you bring a copy of your resume and cover letter with you. You also want to make sure that you're early, but not too early. 10 or 15 minutes prior to your appointed time is plenty. And please remember to silence your cell phone. Ideally, simply turn it off, because you don't even want a vibrating cell phone to distract you or the person who's interviewing you during the interview. So I would say, Rich, and I think you'll agree, just turn the cell phone off if you can.
I agree. I always tell people, don't take a chance. If you don't need to, don't even bring it in the building with you. But if you do, then put it on airplane mode before you actually get to the office where you're going to speak to the people at. Remember, they may be running ahead, and they may actually want you to be, as soon as you walk in the door, go right into the meeting. The military, John, in most cases, everybody I know, we're taught, for an appointment, be there 15 minutes early. This is the same philosophy. You don't need to be there 30 minutes early. If you arrive 30 minutes early, then sit in the parking lot or go grab a cup of coffee, do something. But make sure when you have an appointment, if it's at 2 o'clock, you show up 15 minutes early. And one point, John, I just want to emphasize, because I've seen this happen a number of times, where we have in here, bring a copy of your resume and cover letter with you. Protect that in the sense that bring it in a nice folder, a brown vanilla envelope, something. Don't bring it in a folded up, envelope and give it to them, or carry it in your hands where it might get wrinkled or collect some oil from your fingers. Make sure that when you give that it's in a nice folder, and you take care of that like your prized possession, because that's literally what it should be to you, a prized possession of who you are and why you're the right person for that job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's like we talked about a couple of videos ago, even when you send your resume, send the resume not in a number 10 envelope folded up, but send the resume in a manila envelope so that it is pristine when they take it out, and it actually also stands out in the crowd. Now, during the interview itself, there are a number of things you just want to keep in mind. First of all, always project confidence in yourself and in your ability to excel in the position. Confidence is something that everyone sitting on the other side of that desk is looking for. Very few people are going to hire a new employee who is not exhibiting a certain level of confidence in themselves. Now, that's not the same as arrogance, but it's just a silent understanding that you're going to do great in this position. Remember to smile. You want to project comfort and ease with the person who's interviewing you. Answer every question that they ask honestly and fully. And that means, Rich, even if you don't know the answer to the question, you want to be honest with them and let them know that you don't know. Even if it means that you may not have a particular set of skills or experience that they ask you about, you don't want to lie and say that you do. You want to, it could be a test. It could be that they're just seeing, they know that you don't necessarily have that skill, or they're not even necessarily looking for that skill. They just want to see how you answer the question.
That's an excellent point, John. And I always ask a question of every interviewee that is something I know they do not know the answer to, because I exactly want to know that if they don't know something, they'll say they don't know. Because if I hire somebody and I put them in the workplace and I ask them to do something and they don't know what it is and they go ahead and do it without saying, no, I don't know, that could cause a lot of problems down the line. So these are interviews to find out about what the candidate knows and what they don't know. So this is an important point. One should expect some sort of question that they can answer, because that is a little bit of the game, if you will, the process of doing interviews to find out how people act and react to certain situations. And a lot of the interviews today are scenario-based. They may give you a small scenario of what you might expect as an employee in that job, and they'll say, what would you do in this situation? And what they're looking for is somebody to clearly say what they would do, like you said, honestly and fully, but also at the same token, if they don't know, I always tell people do the same thing I do in the military when I was in there. If I didn't know, I went to my supervisors there and asked for help. That's always a good answer if you don't know what to actually do.
Absolutely. And it's something that a lot of interviewers will just throw in there just to get a better understanding of your character, really, is what we're talking about. The other thing that I think a lot of people are always surprised to hear is that you really should be asking questions during the interview. You actually want to get the person interviewing you to talk about themselves and about the company. You want to show that you're engaged. You want to show interest. And this is also a really good way to work in some of the things you've learned about the company, as well as your most marketable skills, into that conversation. One of the worst things that you can do is, if an interviewer asks you, do you have any questions, is say no. Has that ever happened with people you've been interviewing, Rich?
It does happen from time to time, and I think that comes from not being prepared. And it's simple to ask questions in the sense that you could easily, if I'm being interviewed, one of the questions I always like to ask is, what is one of the company's biggest challenges for the next year where you see that my job could help out? Or what is a current challenge for anything that you may have found on the website? Because there's always challenges. Organizations have challenges on a regular basis. They always have opportunities for improvement. So it's asking very specific questions, but yet can also be vague in the sense like, what's your biggest problem? Or what's the biggest concern? What is the anticipated growth for the next 90 days? Things like that show that you have the opportunity to think about a question, and yet it's generic enough where anybody can answer that question.
And that's a great question to ask. What do you see as your biggest challenge in the next whatever period of time that my position is going to be able to help out with? I've seen that in a lot of sales situations. When someone is interviewing for a sales position, what's the biggest challenge? Well, the biggest challenge is that we are lacking in this particular category of sponsor. And when someone answers a question, that gives you an opening to explain to them how you might be able to help with that. And again, that's going to set you apart. That's going to show that you're engaged, that you're confident, and that you're able to really adapt and contribute at the same time. So absolutely ask questions, and also ask for feedback and give it to the people who are interviewing as well. And that kind of dovetails into concluding the interview. in terms of giving them feedback, I think it's very important to let them know your interest level. You may find during the interview that this is not the job for you. You may find that this is not necessarily the position that you're looking for. And I do believe that people who are interviewing appreciate it when you let them know that, because as much as you obviously don't want your time to be wasted, interviewers don't want their time to be wasted as well, and they don't want to necessarily take your resume to the next level if you're not interested in the position anymore. So definitely give them that feedback, and also don't be afraid to ask for feedback as well. Is there, you can feel free to ask them about your prospects. Do you feel like that you're a good fit, or do they feel like you're a good fit? Do they think that there's a particular thing or area that you're lacking in? Rich, what are some other questions that somebody might ask if they're looking for feedback from an interviewer? What were some questions that you've been asked?
Well, a lot of times the questions will come in the aspect of the follow-up, John. It's about, what are the next steps in the interview process or in the hiring process. It could also mean, I always ask when I was being interviewed, and I think it's a good question for everybody to ask when they're interviewed at near the end, is there any other information that you don't know about me that you would like to know now so I can provide that information to you? And I think that opens the door for anybody who may be sitting on the interview panel, in case they didn't get all their questions asked and answered, to be able to ask that question to get the answer.
Excellent. As you're concluding your interview, you want to try and nail down a follow-up time or an expectation of when they might follow up with you, or whether or not you should follow up with them. Thank them for their time, shake their hand, and walk out of the room smiling. The most important thing is you really want to walk out of that interview feeling like you gave them the best impression of you possible. And it's a great feeling when you can walk out of an interview knowing, Rich, that you did your best.
That's true, John, and sometimes doing your best is subjective. And I'll just give a couple examples here. For the military people who are transitioning out, if you've just gotten out of the military and maybe you're literally within the first 30 days looking for a job, keep in mind the military regiment. So this is not like you're applying for a promotion board where perhaps you would get dragged into a conference room and you have to sit at attention with your shoulders, firmly back and your chin straight out. Yes, sir. No, sir. Those kind of approaches tend not to work well in any kind of civilian organizational hiring situation, because in many cases, when they see that, they may see a person there in a great suit. Yes, sir. No, sir. That may not be the culture that they have within that organization. You can actually hurt yourself by being overly prepared or going in with what you believe is the best approach, when in fact their approach, they're looking for somebody who's a little bit more conversational, a little bit more relaxed. When I was hired in the job after I got out of the service, John, I was hired at the University of Phoenix as an associate dean. And I had been out of the military for 2 years at this time. And actually the interview process, they asked me the question, how do I believe I will be able to lead and manage in that organization as compared to the military? They did have a concern that I might be too much with military bearing and approach that I use in the military and not flexible enough to adjust. So we have to keep in mind what we believe and the assumptions to be what a good interview is and what they're actually looking for. And this comes in part from experience, but also realizing that to make the first impression in a manner that they will receive in a positive manner.
And this dovetails nicely into what you should be doing after the interview. It's important that you don't just complete the interview and then forget about it, because it's possible, maybe even likely, that you're not going to get the job that you went on the first interview for. It may be the second job interview or the third job interview. So you want to make sure that after every interview you do a really honest self-assessment. How do you think you did? What could you change in the future to give an even better interview? And of course, again, for this particular interview, do you really want this job? You know, I think a lot of times people look at interviews as more of a one-way thing. I'm trying to get this job. But an interview is really a two-way street. You have to make sure that it's as good a match for you as they're making sure that you're as good a match for them. So make sure that you really think about that in that self-assessment after the interview. Do you really want the job? Then make sure you send a letter, a follow-up letter, thanking them for their time and, if applicable, restating your level of interest in that position. And keeping with your list, update that section of your list and then move on. But always make sure you do that, for lack of a better term, post-mortem on the interview so that you can always make yourself a little bit better.
There's something to be said, John, for in the Army they have what's known as the after-action review, and any of the listeners here on this training will know exactly what that means if they're in the Army. But if not, what it does, it's similar to what I talk about, John, when I'm working with leaders about self-reflecting, self-assessing, self-correcting, in the sense that you do that self-assessment of that specific interview. Once you reflect upon it, you assess how did it go, what was the good things and not so good things, so you can correct it and do even better on the next one. That's critical, important. And as you close here, John, with this session about the interview, on saying that follow-up thanking them letter, that's an important part of the process. A lot of people do not do that. They don't think it's that important. My recommendation, and what I have found that works well either for me doing it or from others who have done it for me when I was the interviewer, is to do that literally right when you go home. Fill out that letter. Things are still fresh in your mind. You remember the names. Put down whatever it is you want to do in your nice thank you letter. Again, something short, something thanking them for their time and spending the time with you, if you will, and sending it off immediately, because we have to remember the U.S. mail is going to take a couple days. I do not encourage necessarily doing an email unless that's the only method of communication you have, but do it within 24 hours, particularly if it's going to go into the U.S. mail system, because that's going to take a couple days for it to get there, even if it's just around the corner 10 miles from your house. Keep it timely, and it allows you to do our last point here. You've updated your information, and now you move on to the next opportunity.
Absolutely. A couple of important things to remember. You're probably going to be doing this process over and over again. As I said, very rarely will the first job that you apply for be the job that you end up getting. Do not be discouraged if the results don't come in immediately. Stay the course and complete the mission. The only way you're going to complete it is by remaining positive and just keep going with the knowledge, confident in the knowledge that you are going to succeed. So your next steps are to begin posting your resume online. Begin sending out your first resumes and cover letters. Keep a running list of your job search. And of course, if you have any questions or challenges, please don't hesitate to contact us at admin@ProProgressAcademy.com. And when you're ready, and only when you're ready, you can then proceed to Chapter 6. Dr. Rich Shuttler, thank you so much for being with us for this part of our basic training for the transitioning military veteran.
I'm happy to be here, John. I would just like to conclude 2 notes for those who have listening and going through this training with us, is to always remember that this is always about each individual situation and making the very best out of it. That means being prepared. And then the other part is to remember each situation is completely different, and the people in each organization, they have their own unique culture. So that's why it's important to even be prepared more so to realize that every interview could be completely different than the other one.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for listening to this chapter. And again, when you're ready, proceed to Chapter 6.